In 1227, as Genghis Khan passed away, he left behind the greatest empire the world had ever witnessed. Yet, few realized that a mere 4 decades later, this vast domain was embroiled in civil strife, and within another century, it had completely fractured. What led to such a decline? How could such a formidable empire collapse from within? And critically, could the Mongol Empire have endured longer if its successors had chosen a different path? Before delving into the specifics, please share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I'm curious. Today, we'll explore a lesser-known chapter of history, the Mongol Empire following Genghis Khan. This narrative is rich with ambition, power, pivotal decisions, and unforeseen consequences. To grasp the reasons behind the Mongol Empire's dissolution, one must first comprehend Genghis Khan's legacy. Upon his death in 1227, he apportioned authority among his 4 primary sons, Jochi, Chagatai, Ögedei, and Tolui. This wasn't merely an allocation of inheritance. It was the division of an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. Jochi received the Western territories, which later became the Golden Horde in Russia. Chagatai was granted Central Asia. Ögedei, the 3rd son, was designated the Great Khan, the direct successor. Tolui inherited the Mongolian heartland. This seems logical, doesn't it? However, it was precisely here that the first seeds of disintegration were sown, as Genghis Khan had not established a clear system of succession. He relied on personal loyalty to a specific individual, not to a nation or the concept of the Mongol Empire itself. With the passing of that individual, so too did that loyalty often dissolve. Ögedei ascended the throne in 1229, 2 years after his father's demise. His selection was intriguing. Unlike his brothers, Ögedei wasn't a distinguished warrior. He acknowledged this, and therein lay his strength. Ögedei was humble, a rare trait for those holding absolute power. He was adept at listening to his commanders and leveraging the talents of others. He was a pragmatist, focused on results rather than methods. Under Ögedei's leadership, the Mongol Empire continued its expansion. In 1234, he completed the conquest of the Jin dynasty in China. Campaigns were initiated in Western Asia, and most significantly, he launched an invasion of Europe. From 1237 to 1241, Mongol armies, under the command of Batu Khan, devastated Rus, Poland, and Hungary. Cities fell relentlessly. European forces, including the Knights Templar, suffered crushing defeats. In April 1241, at the Battle of Mohi in Hungary, the Mongols inflicted a decisive blow on the Hungarian army. The path to Vienna and the rest of Europe lay open. Then they halted. Why? Because in December 1241, Ögedei died. He passed away after a night of heavy drinking, not a heroic end for the ruler of the world's greatest empire. According to Mongol tradition, all princes had to return for a kurultai, a council, to elect a successor. Batu Khan and the Western army retreated from Europe and never returned. European history was altered by a bottle of wine. This serves as our initial reminder. Personal decisions, no matter how minor they appear, can change the course of history. But more captivating than Ögedei's death is what unfolded next. For the following 5 years, from 1241 to 1246, the Mongol Empire was without a great Khan. Instead, it was governed by Türegin Khatun, Ögedei's widow. Türegin was an astute and ambitious woman. She spent those 5 years forging alliances, eliminating rivals, and ensuring that her son, Guyuk, would become the next great Khan. And she succeeded. Guyuk ascended the throne in 1246, but he and Batu Khan, who led the European campaign, harbored mutual animosity. Both were Genghis Khan's grandchildren. Both believed they were more deserving of power than the other. In 1248, Guyuk mobilized his army to confront Batu, but he died en route. The cause of death remained unclear. It could have been illness, perhaps poison. The empire was again leaderless. This time, Batu Khan, powerful enough to claim the title of Great Khan himself, declined. Perhaps because he was too far from Karakorum, the empire's capital. perhaps because he didn't wish to abandon his newly conquered territories in Russia. Instead, he backed Mongol, another grandson of Genghis Khan, from the Tului lineage. Mongol came to power in 1251, and he did what his predecessors had not. He eliminated his adversaries. Mongol carried out a bloody purge. Members of the Ögedei and Chagatai families who had conspired against him were executed. This marked the first instance in the Mongol Empire's history where royal blood was shed for political motives. A boundary had been crossed, and once a boundary is crossed for the first time, it becomes easier to cross it again and again. Mongol was a capable ruler. He controlled expenditures, conducted a census, and protected civilians. His people adored him. Under Mongol's leadership, the empire continued to expand. His brother Hulagu was dispatched to conquer Western Asia. In 1258, Hulagu captured Baghdad, bringing an end to the Abbasid Caliphate, which had lasted for 5 centuries. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, considered the world's most significant repository of knowledge, was utterly destroyed. It was said that the Tigris River turned black from the ink of countless books cast into its waters. Simultaneously, another of his brothers, Kublai, received the task of concluding the subjugation of China. Everything was proceeding smoothly. The Mongol Empire reached its pinnacle. However, in 1259, Mongol Khan died during the siege of Diaoyu Fortress in China. The aftermath proved significantly more severe, as Mongol had not designated a successor. His 2 brothers, Kublai and Arek Bok, both asserted their claims to the title of Great Khan. This time, neither was willing to yield. The Toluid Civil War, which spanned from 1260 to 1264, marked a pivotal moment in the Mongol Empire's history. This was not merely a confrontation between 2 brothers, but a conflict between 2 distinct visions for the empire's future. Arek Bok championed the traditionalist faction. He remained in Karakorum, the Mongols' original capital, convinced that the empire's core should reside in the steppes, where the nomadic Mongols upheld their ancestral traditions. Kublai, conversely, was situated in China. He recognized that governing a sedentary empire necessitated adapting to the local civilization. He enlisted Chinese officials, studied Chinese characters, and demonstrated reverence for Chinese culture. This was more than a power struggle between 2 leaders. It represented a clash of ideologies. Should the Mongols preserve their nomadic identity, or ought they to adjust to governing conquered peoples? Arek Boka initially held an advantage. He controlled the capital and convened a Kurultai, where he was proclaimed Great Khan. Nevertheless, Kublai possessed something far more crucial: resources. Kublai dominated northern China, one of the globe's wealthiest regions. He commanded a significantly larger army, comprising not only Mongol cavalry, but also Khitan and Jurchen warriors, whose fighting styles resembled the Mongols, as well as tens of thousands of Han infantry. Kublai employed economic warfare tactics. He blockaded Mongolia, cutting off food supplies, which led to famine in Karakorum. In 1261, Arek Boka was compelled to engage in battle. He suffered a defeat at Shimu-Erhutu and retreated.
10 days later, he made another attempt near Jingganshan, but the outcome was a stalemate. However, the results of wars are determined not solely by battles but by logistics. Arek Boka relied on the Yenisei River Valley to provision his army. Yet this proved inadequate against someone who controlled all the resources of northern China. In 1264, Arek Boka surrendered. Kublai imprisoned him. 2 years later, in 1266, Arek Boka mysteriously died in captivity. Many suspected Kublai of poisoning his own brother. The truth may forever elude us. Nevertheless, we comprehend one fact. Kublai won the war but sacrificed the empire's unity. Kublai's victory did not come without cost. The 3 Western Khanates, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Ulus in Central Asia, and the Ilkhanate in Iran, did not acknowledge Kublai as the Great Khan. They continued to send envoys and maintain diplomatic relations, but were essentially independent. Worse, the Uluses began to feud amongst themselves. Berk Khan of the Golden Horde was a devout Muslim. When Hulagu, the ruler of the Ilkhanate,
orchestrated the massacre of Muslims in Baghdad. Berke was enraged. In 1262, war erupted between the Golden Horde and the Ilkhanate. Mongols battled Mongols. Berke even allied with the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, an enemy of the entire Mongol Empire, to contend with Hulagu. This was an exceptionally significant historical juncture. For the first time, religious and regional interests superseded allegiance to the lineage of Genghis Khan. Meanwhile, Kublai contended with Kaidu, a grandson of Ögedei. Kaidu held sway over a portion of the Chagatai Ulus and consistently challenged Kublai's authority. The conflict between Kublai and Kaidu persisted for decades, from the 1260s until Kaidu's demise in 1301. It depleted the resources of both sides. In 1304, a peace treaty was signed among the Uluses, nominally recognizing the Yuan dynasty's supremacy. But this was merely on paper. In reality, the unified Mongol Empire ceased to exist. The four Uluses functioned as independent states, each pursuing its own objectives. Kublai Khan was not an inadequate successor. Indeed, he was among the Mongol Empire's most capable rulers. In 1271, Kublai formally established the Yuan dynasty. This marked the first instance in Chinese history where a dynasty founded by foreigners governed the entirety of China. In 1279, he concluded the conquest of the southern Song dynasty. All of China came under Mongol dominion. Kublai adopted a pragmatic approach to governance. He recruited Chinese officials but retained Mongols in key positions. While he respected Chinese culture, he did not permit Mongols to fully assimilate. He established two distinct capitals, Shangdu, also known as Xanadu, in the north, where the Mongols could uphold their traditional nomadic lifestyle, and Dadu, which is now modern-day Beijing in China. He actively fostered trade, and the Silk Road flourished under his reign. The renowned Italian merchant Marco Polo visited China during this period and resided at his court for numerous years. However, he also made costly errors. I initiated two attempts to invade Japan in 1274 and 1281. Both expeditions ended in complete failure, as violent typhoons, which the Japanese called kamikaze or divine wind, obliterated thousands of warships. Furthermore, I dispatched military campaigns to Vietnam and Java, both of which also proved unsuccessful. These ventures not only drained immense financial resources, but also damaged my reputation as an unbeatable warrior, which was crucial to Mongol prestige. Upon my death in 1294, I left behind a weakened empire. My successors proved considerably less capable. From 1294 to 1368, a mere 74 years, the Yuan dynasty saw 11 emperors ascend to the throne. On average, each emperor ruled for less than 7 years. Between 1308 and 1333, there were 8 emperors. 2 were assassinated, and all died young. The reason for this instability was the absence of clear succession rules. Each imperial death triggered fierce power struggles among various factions, vying to install their preferred candidate. This constant infighting eroded central authority, with power shifting to local warlords who leveraged their armies to bolster their own strength rather than serve the empire. To make matters worse, the Yuan dynasty faced deep resentment from the Han Chinese population. The Mongols maintained a distinct separation, refusing to assimilate into Chinese culture. Mongol women did not bind their feet, a practice that signified high status in China. They wore their traditional attire, ate their own cuisine, and celebrated their distinct holidays. This created a profound chasm in society. The Mongols, forming a ruling class exempt from taxes and enjoying privileges, were nevertheless a minority. The Han Chinese, who constituted the majority, viewed them with disdain. From the late 1340s onward, a series of natural disasters, including droughts, floods, and famine, plagued the country. The Yuan government lacked effective programs to address these crises. In 1351, the Red Turban Rebellion erupted, initially a peasant uprising, but quickly escalating into a nationwide revolt. The last Yuan emperor, Togon Temur, was an ineffectual ruler with little interest in governing. He spent his time engaged in esoteric Tibetan Buddhist rituals and entertainment. In 1368, as Ming forces approached Beijing, Togon Temür made no effort to defend the capital. He simply fled. He retreated north to Chengdu, then to Karakorum. 2 years later, he died in Yingchang, Inner Mongolia. The Mongol Empire's rule in China came to an end. While the Yuan dynasty collapsed in China, other Mongol khanates also faced significant challenges. The Ilkhanate in Persia was the first to fall. In 1335, after the death of Abu Sa'id Bahadur, with no clear heir, the state disintegrated into numerous smaller entities. The Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia similarly fragmented, with constant conflict among various factions. The Golden Horde in Russia endured the longest, until the 15th century, but it too gradually weakened and splintered into smaller khanates. In 1552, Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible defeated the last remaining Mongol principalities in Kazan and Astrakhan, marking the end of Mongol dominance in Europe. As for the Mongols in Mongolia, they reverted to their nomadic way of life, dispersed into warring tribal groups. Karakorum, the grand capital of Genghis Khan, was razed by Chinese forces in 1388. The unified Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous empire in history, ceased to exist.
However, the legacy extends beyond its fall. Despite its relatively short lifespan, roughly 150 years from Genghis Khan's unification to its complete dissolution, its lasting impact is still felt today. Economically, the Mongols established the most prosperous Silk Road in history. They introduced the Yam system, a network of postal stations that ensured rapid communication across thousands of miles. They protected merchants, reduced taxes, and standardized weights and measures. During this era, concepts such as bills of exchange, deposit banks, and insurance traveled from Asia to Europe. Culturally, thanks to the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, culture and knowledge flowed freely across Eurasia. Islamic mathematics and astronomy reached Europe, and papermaking technology and printing from China diffused westward. Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and many other explorers could safely crisscross Asia, an unimaginable feat before the Mongol era.
Administratively, many Mongol governance systems were adopted by subsequent dynasties. The Chinese Ming dynasty, for instance, incorporated elements of the Mongol garrison system. The monarchs of France adopted Mongolian administrative practices and military tactics. However, history also contained its dark chapters. The Black Death, a plague that wiped out a third of Europe's population, is widely believed to have spread along the Silk Road. Millions perished during the Mongol conquests. Cities like Baghdad and Samarkand were devastated. Libraries and cultural monuments were destroyed. History is rarely black and white. It typically resides in shades of gray. So, what pertinent lessons can we glean from the trajectory of the Mongol Empire after Genghis Khan? The first lesson: the absence of robust systems undermines sustainable succession. Genghis Khan built his empire on personal loyalty to him. After his demise, no mechanism existed to preserve this unity. His successors frequently contended to re-establish such allegiance. Today, successful organizations grasp this principle. They cultivate systems, a distinctive culture, and core values, elements that persist independently of any single individual. The second lesson: diversity necessitates underlying unity. The Mongol Empire encompassed numerous diverse cultures, faiths, and ways of life. This duality served as both a wellspring of strength and a source of vulnerability. When the overarching objective, such as territorial expansion, waned, these differences fractured into discord. Muslims within the Golden Horde were unable to reconcile themselves with the massacre of Muslims in Baghdad. Traditional Mongols disapproved of Kublai's increasing Sinicization. Therefore, the conclusion is that diversity is beneficial, but it must be solidified by shared core values. The third lesson: adapt or face dissolution. Kublai Khan recognized that governing China would necessitate adapting to Chinese culture. Yet, he also sought to retain his Mongolian identity. This represented a delicate equilibrium that the Yuan dynasty ultimately failed to uphold. They were not sufficiently Chinese to be fully embraced by the Han population, but became too Chinese for the traditional Mongols. We observe a similar predicament today in global corporations. How does one localize while maintaining a global identity? The Mongols wrestled with this very question 700 years ago. The fourth lesson: power abhors a vacuum. Whenever a great Khan died, a period of anticipation, sometimes lasting years, ensued until a successor was chosen. In this power void, factions consolidated influence, forged alliances, and prepared for conflict. The lesson here is that leadership uncertainty within any organization breeds chaos. A clear succession plan is absolutely critical. The fifth lesson: winning a war does not equate to securing peace. Kublai triumphed in the civil war against Arak-Boka, but this victory had a steep price: the definitive fragmentation of the empire. The Western Uluses never recognized Kublai's authority. Sometimes, the manner in which a victory is achieved holds greater significance than the victory itself. Let us now revisit the initial query. Could the Mongol Empire have endured longer if its heirs had made different choices? The answer is, possibly. If Genghis Khan had instituted clear rules of succession instead of relying on the Kurultai, where power often went to the strongest rather than the most suitable. If Ögedei had consumed less alcohol and lived longer to complete the conquest of Europe and establish a more stable administrative framework. If Mongol had designated a successor before his death, thereby averting the civil war between Kublai and Arak-Boka. If Kublai had discovered a way to reconcile the Western Khanates instead of permitting their complete independence. If the Yuan emperors following Kublai had been more capable and more invested in statecraft. However, history does not entertain counterfactuals. History only records what actually occurred. And what transpired was this. The Mongol Empire, the largest continuous land empire in history, disintegrated for the very same reasons that numerous other great empires crumbled. These include the absence of a clear system for succession, internal power struggles, an inability to adapt to new challenges, and a growing estrangement between the ruling class and the populace. The history of the Mongol Empire after Genghis Khan transcends a mere recounting of the past. It serves as a narrative for the present and the future. This is because the challenges faced by the Mongols, how to uphold unity amidst diversity, how to adapt without forfeiting identity, how to seamlessly transfer power, are the identical challenges we confront today in our families, workplaces, and societies. History functions as a mirror. It doesn't offer solutions, but it poses pertinent questions. Therefore, reflect on your own life and your own organization. Are you constructing resilient systems? Or are you solely reliant on specific individuals? Are you preparing for transitions of power? Or are you allowing them to unfold chaotically? Are you adapting to change? Or are you striving to maintain the status quo? These are the questions the Mongols confronted, and their responses shaped global history. If this video presented a fresh perspective on history, please like and subscribe to help the channel produce more high-quality content. Please share in the comments below what you believe was the most crucial element contributing to the Mongol Empire's downfall, and if similar missteps are being repeated in today's world. And remember, you still haven't answered the initial question. Where are you watching from and what time is it now? Do let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.